Dustin Morse, thanks for joining us. It's kind of the question that we start with everybody. How did baseball find you?
Well, I mean, I think it's the greatest game in the world, right?
Love
So,
that.
I mean, I grew up playing the game. I think for me, being a Minnesota kid
Yeah.
and the age that I am, it was kind of that 1987 Twins that, I don't know, maybe forever changed my life.
Yeah.
I got a chance to meet a guy by the name of Kirby Puckett
Mm-hmm.
at a card shop not far from my house. He signed my glove,
Yeah.
which was an awesome moment, right?
Of
Like
course.
you're in with your hero. But the problem was he signed my glove, and then I didn't want to play defense the way I could play defense because I didn't want to lose that autograph on the glove. So, uh, it was a great time in my life. I was 7, 8 years old, and you win a world championship, you're hooked, right? And then
Yeah.
a couple years later, in '91, they do it again, and
Insane.
from that point forward, I was just like, man, that's just the coolest thing ever, right? And
Yeah.
I was always a fan, watched the game, played the game. I wasn't good enough to play college. It was a tough pill to swallow because
Yeah.
you think you're great.
You think you're hot shit?
You're gonna amount to some type of, I don't know, maybe an average big leaguer or whatever.
Yeah.
But no, I mean, it's an impossible game, and you start learning when, I don't know, you're 14, 15, when pitches start moving and your knees start buckling.
Yeah.
Like, oh, I got some work to do. But still loved it, loved the strategy. Went to college, and maybe a little arrogant at the time, I pretty much called my shot and said, I want to work in baseball. If I'm not
Yeah.
going to play baseball, I'm
Yeah.
going to work in baseball. So, sent some resumes and kind of tailored my education. I went to the University of Wisconsin. Didn't have really a dedicated sports program or anything like that at the time, but I got into communications and journalism. The older I got a little more focused on, I'm going to do this baseball thing.
Yeah.
I kind of learned about sports PR through a couple key professors at school, and started writing to teams.
Mm-hmm.
Back then, in the late 90s, early 2000s, you had to write. You had
Yeah.
to write a letter, fill out, a form, send a resume. And I wasn't good at it.
Yeah.
My resume didn't have much on it.
Yeah.
And I remember that summer, it was maybe the summer 2000, got 8 or 9 rejection letters.
Mm-hmm.
Ate some humble pie and ended up finding something else to do. Actually worked at a liquor store in Vail, Colorado that year as
Nice.
my girlfriend at the time, later became my wife, had an internship in Vail. She was in the tourism world.
Cool.
So I went with her out to Vail, Colorado, and had a blast, and kind of refocused out there and tried to figure out how to break into sports,
Mm-hmm.
and specifically baseball. I mean, it was always baseball, but sports guy. So, I mean, some other opportunities potentially, but took some advice from some key people at school to build out that resume, got more involved in campus life and some volunteering. And, this friend of mine, best friend, was his older brother was doing a book. He worked for a publishing company that was doing a book with the National Baseball Hall of Fame in Cooperstown, New York. And he said, man, you should look into that.
Yeah.
And I was like, that's cool. That's real cool. And I wrote them a letter, got a call back, and we talked on the phone for a little bit about the passion that I had for the sport. And I couldn't believe it, but I was basically invited to come out for that summer.
Yeah.
You want to know what's crazy? Is that summer Kirby Puckett was getting inducted into the Hall of Fame.
That's insane.
I was like, whoa, man, this is for a kid from Minnesota, and that's my hero. I was like, it's pretty meant to be. So that summer between, I still had a semester left at school, but I drove out to Cooperstown with my dad, who was always my baseball coach growing up. My mom was a huge baseball fan too, and so they were very supportive. And I went out to Cooperstown. And if anybody's been there or hasn't been there, I mean, it's a small village up in upstate New York, man.
One
when
street.
I was going further and further out there, I was like, whoa. But it's the place. If you love baseball, it was an amazing place to start my career.
Yeah.
I mean, I use this line a lot, but I got to start my career where everybody wants to finish at the Hall. So it was a great place to start, kind of reconfirm the passion you need. You learn the history, the tradition, just the importance of America's pastime and the importance of connecting generations. I mean, baseball, you learn quickly, whether you're a 5 or 6 year old or a 95 or 6 year old, everybody talks baseball.
Yeah.
So cool place to start. That was a great opportunity for me. I met a ton of people from the Minnesota Twins and actually met a ton of people from the San Diego Padres. Dave Winfield, also a Minnesota guy, got inducted that same summer. So that Padres connection will come back later in my story. But met a lot of Twins folks. I knew it was a great networking summer. It just reconfirmed this is what I want to do. Kind of a slower pace, though. I mean, I will say a summer in Cooperstown, there is the peak of Hall of Fame weekend, but it's a lot of, behind the scenes work and build up for that weekend. And I was tasked with doing a lot of gallery talks and learning the history of, say, the uniform.
Yeah.
And you master that exhibit, and then you tell those stories as people come through, and really met a lot of cool people that way, and just baseball fans. But went back to college, finished out my my college career, and I started writing letters again. And man, that time I had a lot more success.
Nice.
I had about 5 teams that were interested in talking to me, including the Twins, but the Cubs struck first.
Yeah.
Interviewed with them. They offered me an internship. That was back in '02.
Cool.
Don Baylor was the manager. Awesome guy.
Yeah.
Welcomed me in. I was a young kid. I mean, I was literally like 20, 21, and kind of cut my teeth there with the Cubs. Big market back then. It was 6 or 7 major newspapers, WGN, celebrities coming through to the 7th inning stretch. I think I met NSYNC and Backstreet and Britney that year.
That's sick.
Norm from Cheers was there. Eddie
Yeah.
Vedder. I mean, it was like, oh man, baseball at Wrigley was amazing. I mean, a lot of sellouts. It was a terrible team, but I mean, that's where I learned really the tradition. You know, I mean,
especially Wrigley.
If you want to learn about baseball, I mean, or the crazy passionate fans, I mean, Wrigley's the place to be. So, and then I was hooked, man. It was Cubs, and that exploded. I got to network and meet everybody in the world of PR. I was focused on the public relations, communications, baseball information side of the business. Still maybe open to whether it was baseball operations. Everybody generally wants to be a GM. Yeah, that's the focus. But I was pretty interested in, the storytelling with baseball and the player relations side, and how to help them with their personal brands and anything that they have going on. And then the Cubs, that was about a year, and that led me to the Texas Rangers. There was one opening that offseason in PR, and I was fortunate enough to get it. I was hired by a guy named John Blake, who wasn't an easy interview. I was extremely nervous. It was like 2 days after I got married. And I remember, if John ever watches this, I remember taking off my wedding ring because I didn't want it to come up during the interview. He's like, "Oh, you're married. When'd you get married?" Like 2 days ago, I just felt at that time I didn't want I just was baseball, and I wanted to talk baseball, but ended up getting that job. And my new wife, but I'd been with her for forever, Megan, was very supportive of this baseball pursuit. We moved to Arlington, jumped in a U-Haul, and headed south.
Yep.
And I was in Texas, joined a squad that had A-Rod and Juan Gonzalez and Michael Young and Rafael Palmeiro. And it was a pretty star-studded team that stunk. I mean, it was horrible, man. I mean, it was bad. It was really, really bad. I learned what losing can do, because that's when I lost my job to budget cuts end of that year. And I back 11 months ago, I got my dream job, a full-time job in Major League Baseball in PR, doing what I love, working with superstars. Yeah. I mean, A-Rod was making like $24.5 million, and I was making $24,500. They couldn't afford me. And like the last part of my job, and I still say this, like A-Rod owes me money, because my last duty with the Texas Rangers was to find, information and stories and clips that would support Alex Rodriguez for the MVP. Because Alex had a pretty good year, but it was a horrible team, and he won MVP. And I was like, I must have helped with that, but he got a $750,000 bonus, and I lost my job. So I was like, later brought that story. A good friend of mine, Mike Herman, and his counterpart with the Yankees, brought that up with A-Rod, and it like went nowhere. He was like, I didn't even get a bonus that year. I'm like, check your contract, bro. You did. So we've talked about it a few times. As Alex did his ESPN work, there was a few times where he stole my office, and I reminded him of this story. But,
I love that.
But anyways, losing your job is an interesting thing as a 22, 23-year-old, especially when you think it's your dream job, man. You hit the reset button and you network, you figure out, who's on your side, who's in your corner. And it was really the best thing that ever happened to me, because the San Diego Padres called, and they built a beautiful brand new ballpark, Petco Park, first year in '04, and expanded their department a little bit. And 6 weeks, 8 weeks later, I ended up joining the Padres PR team. And it was an extremely fun time there. I mean, moving to the beach, Southern California. Padres kind of had some new mojo here with the stadium, and a good team too. A lot of great players that are still friends to this day. You know, the Trevor Hoffmans of the world, and Mark Lorettas and Brian Giles, and it was a fun team. But it was led by Bruce Bochy, who is one of the greatest guys in my career. That just, quick story. It was my first road trip ever as a young member. I think I must have been 23 or 24, and I got to do a lot with the Padres. They threw me right into it. Kevin Towers was the GM. Awesome human being, but they just trusted me with the team. So I went out to St. Louis. I think it was a St. Louis Cincinnati road trip back in like 04 or 05. And Boch was this great, just this larger than life figure. He's a big man as it is, but he was, he's kind of king down there in San Diego. But he must have known it was my first road trip or whatever. And, I'm a little nervous, and got through the pregame and got through the game. And I think my scorecard did fly out of the press box. And I lost it. So things weren't going great, but we won the game. And I get down to Boch's office after the game. And generally how a PR person, you have 10 minutes where you kind of talk things over with the manager, maybe the starting pitcher, or the athletic trainer, or the GM on just like, hey, what are they going to ask? Mm-hmm. They being the media, what are the talking points today? Who second guessed me? Whatever it might be. Yeah. And so I go into Bochy's office trying to figure out, hey, Boch, legendary manager, like, does he need my help? But yeah, I'm trying to play the part. He's like, hey, go into that fridge right there. Grab 2 cold ones. I'm like, okay. So I grabbed 2 beers and put it on his desk, and he's like, one of them's for you. Isn't that your first road win? And I'm like, what do I do? What do I do? So we crack the beer. Cheers. I start drinking the beer. And then like 30 seconds into the chugging, my boss, Kevin Towers, walks in, and I'm like, oh my gosh, like, I'm drinking on the job, man. This isn't good. And then Towers looks at me and says, hey, where's mine? So then the 3 of us had one, and it was kind of like, that was it, man. Then initiation kind of took off from there. And then we can get into the details, but I spent a couple years there in San Diego. It was great. Loved every second of it. But the Twins called in 2006, and it was an opportunity I couldn't pass up. My hometown team. Literally. Got to come back and hook up with the mighty Twins. And that's when I met some of the people I call friends to this day. Torrey Hunter was one of the first I met. Put his arm around me and just did the rounds, spring training, made me feel at home. And then all those guys that I idolized when I was a young kid in 87 and 91 started coming around, and they were coworkers now, the Ken Herbecks of the world. Yeah. See Paul Molitor, Tom Bernansky, and they all were coaches, managers, and just Twins legends that, some of them, their daughters intern for me. So it's like, it's kind of crazy to think where I was and where I've been lucky enough to get to today. It's been a cool journey, man. So 23 years in sports, 23 years in baseball, all on the PR side, player relations side, 4 different teams in the Hall of Fame. So I think it's a love of the game, but that's the longest answer ever to how baseball found me.
No, and it was great. Like, honestly, the stories that you're providing, it's because I didn't even know this stuff about you. And I think that's what our whole podcast, Kangaroo Court's trying to encapsulate. When you were saying, card shop with Kirby, and then you go working at Hall of Fame, like, the stuff you can't write about. That's the stuff that it makes lives, but it makes great stories, and it's stuff that you wouldn't know. And baseball has a weird way of doing that.
Yeah, you've been around the game, right? Yeah. I remember you as a young, clubby.
Yeah.
You were running around, rail thin, thinking like you own the place. And I'm like, who is this guy? That's Eddie's son? Like, he's got 2 of them. And your little brother, Jacob's, running around too. And it's like, you guys would scrub a few pairs of shoes and then joke around with everybody the whole time. And Hot Rod would yell at you to get going. But yeah, it's crazy to think where we are now. A lot of the guys that from the 06, 7, 8, 9 teams now we all have kids the same age and high school, and some are going off to college. It's insane. You learn in this job that, yes, out there on the field, when the lights go on, they are stars and celebrities and idols to so many. Because we were there, Nico. We were I was that kid that looked up to so many of these players that, now that I've got a a look at the human side of them,
Mm-hmm.
as the father, as the husband, the emotions that come with success and failure. I mean, you got to remember that these guys are human and they have issues with, their spouses or relationships, and they're not locked in every day like you'd hope as a fan, that they're just machines and can do it. And a lot of times they're able to flush it and go play. But I mean, just today we're dealing with a player that's got like a really upset stomach and not feeling like he can really, get off the toilet.
Yeah.
And I can't say that PR wise, like, hey, this guy's got severe diarrhea.
Yeah.
But it's like human things happen to
Yeah.
human beings, and not all of them can go out and play. So it's been fun to be on the inside for sure. But I've also tried to develop a social platform or relationship with our broadcast partner on how to show some of this stuff, humanize our guys.
Yeah.
I think I've done a decent job over the last couple of years to share some of those stories or show some of the behind the scenes, or just really kind of drill down on a few guys like you're doing in a sense, and just have the general fans learn a little bit more of what makes that person tick. So it's a fun job. I don't take it for granted. I look back at that Texas experience when somebody walks you out the door and says, it's time for you to go. I mean, I do cherish every day, because it's, again, America's pastime and the greatest game ever. And I love watching these guys do amazing things on the field. And then I get to write about it, read about it, talk about it, and share it out with all my friends. And then you see all those such passionate fans. I mean, baseball fans are the most passionate. I mean, they can be critical.
Very.
It's a tough sport, but I still think, you have 162 games, and 20, 30,000 are coming out for every single game. I mean, the sport is strong and people want more of it. And, just blessed to be right there on the front lines with so many great people in this game.
Yeah. And you've been doing it for so long. You talked about when you were at the Hall of Fame, you're connecting generations. You've seen generations fly through this organization, started in 06, where maybe you're about the same age as people coming up. Now you've been here for so long and doing your thing and doing such a great job at it, by the way. Like, it's so funny because I talked to my parents, and I didn't even realize, like, when my dad was first playing here, his first stint, you weren't here.
Right.
I feel like I've known you since, like,
right.
I was, like, young. I guess when was the first time? Then maybe, like, 08 when he got traded here then. And then obviously after, I mean, coming
Well,
back
it's like
every
your
week.
dad, for me, it's like that everyday Eddie. Like, I wasn't here. Like, I was with other teams.
Yeah.
And, it's you. I would say, like, you always have an eye on your hometown team.
Yeah.
Like, I always cared what the Twins were doing, but I was pretty locked in on whether it was the Cubs, Rangers, or Padres. But, you took note of, like, those 02 Twins or 04 Twins. And, I don't know, you just knew the names. And then, you come into it, and when the Twins are back then, I mean, it was a small front office. People have been here forever. I mean, I kid you not, Nico, when I was brought here in 06, I felt like the new guy for like 5 years.
Yeah.
I mean, literally, Eddie came back. Everybody knew Eddie. Well, I didn't. I had to kind of build that relationship.
Yeah.
And that's very important in my role, is to build the relationship and build the trust. And when you come in as a 21, 22-year-old, like, you're pretty much the same age as those guys, or the older guys aren't that much older, but you start getting older and the players keep getting younger, and you have to reinvent yourself. And how do you connect off the field with guys? And I try to, whether it's through fantasy football or kids or music or some other hobby, animals, charities, like, I always try to find a way to connect with a player. And it does get older or harder as you get older and they get younger.
Yeah.
And it's like, you coming from different parts of the world too. I mean, I remember trying to figure out how to connect with Miguel Sano, who was a larger than life personality here, and be his PR rep on, like, how can we showcase this lovable personality? And it took us some time, but he became, like, I don't know, big brother, little brother. And I was the big brother, and he was like 3 times my size. But, it was, when he and Byron came along, it was like they were supposed to be like the greatest players that were going to save the Twins. And you look back at, like, how much pressure do we put on those guys coming up as prospects? And you see so many of those stories that, baseball, the projections are here, and if you don't live up to those expectations, you're a bust. Yeah. You see these guys go through pressure, down years, good years. It's such a tough sport to stay, consistently good at. And when you look at a player like Joe Mauer, for instance, right? Like, everybody loves Joe Mauer. I mean, what he went through as a player physically and being, those, I guess those that don't know Joe Mauer, he's the #1 pick in the draft by the Minnesota Twins. He grew up right here in St. Paul, and he's like
Has
related
twins.
to everybody.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, now he's later in life.
Yeah.
He's got twins himself. I mean, like a storybook career, but he was also maybe one of the most criticized players in Minnesota sports history. I mean, he signed a big contract, and what comes with that contract? What's the expectation? How are you going to win a World Series, win a playoff game, or give back to the community, or whatever it is? It was like every day there was something with this guy, and when you're attached to a player like that and you're trying to balance their daily schedule or what their interests are or how much they just need to be locked in on the game. I don't think people actually realized how much prep work he needed, how much homework. As a catcher, I mean, he was studying all the time, and being an elite hitter that won 3 batting titles, it was like crazy. Actually looking back at it, pretty crazy that we all had a front row. You were right there too, watching that guy play. So, I mean, you go on and on about different players and different stories, and sometimes you unfortunately see guys kind of let their careers slip away too. I mean, they've got some bad habits or some off the field, and you see a guy taking it for granted that every day scouts, baseball operations, front office members are looking to find a player to replace you.
Yeah.
The next best player. Yeah. So you got to stay sharp. You got to stay focused. You are in the top 1% of anything in the world. You're pretty elite. So on top of that, it's also a very difficult sport to play. It just goes to show you the discipline you need to be that Hall of Fame type player. And it's again, I just keep saying it's cool to be right there, right on the front lines with these guys. And you hope you win more than you lose, because win's a heck of a lot more fun.
Yes.
And I mean, high fives after a game are maybe the highlight of the day, no matter how bad the day is.
Yeah.
It's like if you get a dub at the end, it's great. And, losses happen. That's the tricky part about baseball. 162 of them, you're going to lose 50 or 60. You know it. Yeah. Just how you deal with those and how you battle back. And that's why it's such a great game, too, the strategy and the chess match. Not only the season is, but within the game.
Yeah.
Nowadays, Nico, things have changed so much from when I first started. The advanced reports and knowing exactly what a player's tendencies are. Yeah. I mean, it's hard to you see some rookies go through it, right? I mean, they come out and they're playing well. I mean, maybe you look at our current roster, there's a couple guys, young kids that came out pretty hot, and then the league adjusts, right? Because they got the book on you, and then you have to adjust to those adjustments. So I don't know, just to be a player that plays like a Jim Thome or a Cal Ripken that plays Derek Jeter years and years and years at the highest level.
Yeah.
Just much respect, man.
100%. Yeah, I guess you've had such a unique perspective of the game. But yeah, there's everybody talks about the players. They don't talk about the Dustin Morses. And that's the thing that people don't like, how you have to balance your life away from home as well as the players. You're working when they're gone out of the clubhouse. You're doing all this stuff behind the scenes to make sure everything runs smoothly. And I think you guys, the Mike Hermans, all these people that I say I was raised by, need more credit. And also, I guess piggybacking off of that, how do you balance your life, during the season? Your dad, your husband, your friend, how hard can that get? As much as it, it can be on the players, it's the same thing for you. You're going on the road trips, you're doing all your stuff.
Yeah, I mean, you're a real one. You get it. You understand it. I mean, I think the support staff, if we're doing our job, we are out of the headlines. We shouldn't be making noise or a distraction. But it is nice every once in a while to hear somebody appreciate the things that you do to put the show on, right? I mean, every night there's a ton of people in the front office, from the grounds crew to the scoreboard operations to marketing. I mean, you put these players on a pedestal to put on, a great show, make it entertaining. I mean, at the end of the day, it is, supposed to be a fun, escape for people to come watch their favorite athletes perform and do something great. It's just our job to maybe make that easier for them to come out and enjoy a night at the ballpark, have a fun time. You can't always promise a win, but hopefully you can promise a good time. But yeah, it's about finding what makes you happy too. I mean, I'm not going to sit here and tell you absolutely everything is so enjoyable at work. There's times where you're in back-to-back-to-back meetings or you're in the budget cycle and trying to map out or forecast what things are going to cost, and you'd love to do everything, but you don't have the means to make it all work. You've got, a staff that you work with and need to make sure everybody, has their, gets their credit, and personal objectives, department objectives, a lot of the paperwork that just comes with the territory. I mean, there's a lot of office work. A lot of people, I think, kind of look at my job and can appear glamorous. You're right there with the guys, and you're in a clubhouse. I mean, I've been in a room where the three managers I've worked with the Minnesota Twins are Ron Gardenhire, Paul Molitor, and Rocco Baldelli, and very different. But I've seen, a tough time in my career was when Ron Gardenhire and Terry Ryan, who are like fathers to me.
Yeah.
And they are like brothers.
Yeah.
And the team was going in the wrong direction. And you'd see some of that questioning. It wouldn't happen much, but you'd see them kind of at odds. And then I'm the third one in the office. This was back a few years where you'd have your 10 minutes of cool down after a win or a loss. But, as the losses pile up, you see jobs are at stake, right? And you see, these father figures really struggling with public criticism, or maybe they do make a mistake, and it is a mistake that's on the headlines of the paper the next day, or in about 5 minutes, you got to answer reporters with why you did what you did. And, I've seen them almost break down, and head in hands, just blow a save in the ninth inning when you had a game in hand. And it's, I mean, you got to collect yourself and talk about it. But I've seen, those types of friendships kind of crumble under the pressure of sports. And if you don't win, there's jobs lost. And, Terry Ryan had to fire Ron Gardenhire. And I just told you they were like brothers, and they're like fathers to me. And I felt like I had to pick a side. And I was the guy called up to the office upstairs to write a press release about the Ron Gardenhire dismissal. And that's tough. And I mean, I cried on Gardy's shoulders, and he was kind enough to come in and do a press conference, talking about it, which looking back at it, I can't believe I asked him to do it. And I can't believe he said yes, but I think that's who he was. And it gave him a chance to say goodbye to the people of Minnesota in that role.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Gardy rebounded and ended up managing with the Tigers and is still a dear friend. But, then later Terry loses his job.
Yeah.
And you're like, my goodness. Or you see players get traded away, or players have really severe injuries, and you see, their dreams shattered right there on the field. I mean, it's tough to watch a guy blow out, and that's the last time you see him, or take a fastball in the teeth, and you're kind of there for that stuff too. So it's not all great.
Glitz and glamour.
And you've seen your dad too. I mean, your dad. I mean, if you want to get down to it, I mean, he was a coach here too. That ended up, we moved on from him, and he's a Twins Hall of Famer.
Exactly.
And there's some tough, relationships within the game that, I mean, it's at the end of the day, it's still a competitive sport, and win or else, you know? So, for all the fun stuff, there is some days that, man, you go home and you're like, that was a tough one emotionally. And sometimes just going back for more the next day when it's going to be completely different or under different leadership. It's you kind of have to stay to who you are, but also adapt to changes around you.
100%. Do you have any funny stories you want to share? I know you got a lot.
I mean, that's where you got to figure out where you go with these. But, oh gosh. I
mean, we're an uncensored podcast.
I remember when we clinched once, I think it was 04, 05. There was a player named Robert Fick. Awesome guy. Pretty fun. But he was drinking the hard stuff after a clinch, and Bruce Bochy was firing up a stogie or something. And, you dump beer and whatever. And like this guy dumped like 100 proof something over Bochy, and he almost lit his face on fire with, right before he's going on camera to do an interview. And it's like, he didn't start on fire, luckily, but like the whiskey was like burning his eyes, and he's a big man. He couldn't see what was going on. And, that was my first clinch celebration.
Yeah.
That was pretty cool. I met, for the first time I met a player when I joined the Padres. He was in the middle of the clubhouse completely naked. Shaving some body parts that
that's the good stuff right there.
I was introduced to, and I'm like, do I shake your hand or not? So you get real comfortable with most of your work is done in a men's locker room.
Yes.
I mean, so you see some weird things there.
Oh, yeah.
Another time I was on the road at a hotel where I think some charity were selling tickets to sell or give away a Harley or some motorcycle in a lobby of like some Marriott somewhere. And I remember getting back late with a couple players. I wasn't with them, but kind of saw them in the lobby. And one of the guys decided to drive the motorcycle around and through the lobby and ended up stashing the bike in an elevator or whatever. And I was like, what world is this, man? And like, I swear the security guy was just kind of letting it happen. I mean, the guy did have a motorcycle's license, so he knew what he was doing.
Okay.
But I mean, as the PR guy, I'm like, oh my God, how do you explain this one? Is that like Grand Theft Auto or what? I mean, what are we doing here? But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things that are probably not HR appropriate.
No, of course.
Behind closed doors.
100%.
But most of it is just some of these baseball players are so creative on how they prank each other and set each other up with, Mike Pelfrey was a player that was always an easy target. You set up some hidden cameras and do some fun pranks. You could pull it. I mean, we did a NCAA prank on Pelfrey, went to Wichita. Or didn't go there, but he was a big Wichita State basketball fan.
Yeah.
And Ron Gardenhire was the prank master, man. I mean, anything you touched on his desk, by the way, would like electrocute you or something.
So,
it was like a buzzer with the pen or whatever. I mean, he was always pretty good at pranking guys, but there was a good prank we pulled on. Pelfrey thought he was firing up the basketball team when he really had his teammates on the other end of the line in the clubhouse. And Gardy was all about it. We had like 6 hidden cameras in his room, and then that is that's out there on the internet somewhere. That's a good one. I'm sitting in the room because I had to dial the fake number, which I think was Glenn Perkins and Matt Guerrier, and just classic pranking left and right. But they ride each other so good too. I mean, Brian Dozier had this thing that was the greatest thing ever when we were on bus rides. He'd call it the Hotline Bling.
Yeah,
a song came out and it was he'd kind of rap. He had this whole script, and there was a microphone on the bus rides. And these are generally late bus rides. You land in a city, it's like midnight, and you're driving to a hotel 30, 40 minutes away. So the Hotline Bling was you send a text into Dozier. Yeah. It's anonymous, basically ripping somebody on that bus about something that you didn't like about them, but you didn't really want to attach your name to it. So then Dozier would speak to somebody, would clip their nails at their chair in the locker room. That was, total bullshit. Whatever. So Dozier had such a good sense of humor about ripping guys there too. So, I mean, it's brotherhood, I guess. Yeah. The guys like know how to rip each other without getting too personal. Yeah. I mean, sometimes there's, I remember during kind of the real explosion with Twitter, I remember having to scrub some guys' accounts, and they were liking or retweeting some things that maybe they shouldn't. And it was always an awkward call to be like, "Hey, I don't know if you really want this out there, but you liked such and such's Twitter handle or tweet." Oh, geez, yeah, thanks. That must have been by accident. So some of that stuff, just the PR side. I mean, it's like everybody is entitled to be who they are, but you just try to remind some guys that they're role models and. I don't know. I mean, it's all nothing crazy. It's just, be smart about who you are and what you're doing. And I always give a speech at spring training about being smart about 24-hour rule, take a deep breath. If you're going to say something or put something out there, would your grandmother want to read it? That type of thing. And for the most part, we've been so blessed in Minnesota that every guy gets it.
Yeah.
Great human beings to work with. They treat everybody with such respect and, know how to have a good time too. I mean, Rocco right now, I mean, he's as laid back as they come, but he's got, he likes to set people up for, embarrassment if you can. And you got to have thick skin. You've seen it.
Oh,
I've been in laundry baskets.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think. I think Boof Bonzer once put me
Yeah.
in a laundry basket back in like '06 time frame. Had some interesting some things with your dad, to be honest,
Oh, I've
both
seen
as
it.
a player and a coach.
I've seen
There's
it.
some video out there of that. I think I'm sitting on a gold mine right there. Him and Dozier and a few others were involved in. They'd always set me up to go. Somebody would need me, and my back would be turned, and boy, then I'd be in for a big surprise.
Yeah.
I've had some fun times with. Lance Lynn was always a fun one that made the PR guy very, very nervous.
Yes.
Ricky Nolasco would always be very blunt about his feelings on whatever happened. Delman Young was always classic too.
Yeah.
I mean, he had a love-hate relationship, I think, with the media. And it was kind of my job to be the person there in the middle. All these guys were great to me. It's just like they're different emotions, man, different competitive juices at different times that you just learn to deal with each personality. I mean, Eduardo Escobar was maybe one of the greatest teammates and personalities that we've seen.
Amazing.
I mean, he was just funny. And as a PR guy, he trusted me with a lot of what his image was going to be.
Yeah.
And I just knew that if we put him on camera, he would light up the world, right?
Really?
And you'd talk to him a little strategy about, like, he loved Fogo de Chao. And
Loved
he
it.
kind of talked about Fogo Power. Like, hey, say that in your interviews. Say that in your interviews. And then he would always end with, like, Fogo Power, Fogo Power. That led to an endorsement.
Dude, literally.
He's like Mr. Fogo. I mean, it's like he knew how to just, he knew English was his second language. He knew enough to be really humorous, but also, like, very charming. Like, he really connected with the fan base because he was him. He was, but I mean, some all-time greats. I mean, the Michael Kadires and Torrey Hunters and Justin Morneau's and Joe Mauers and Joe Nathans and Johan Santana's and you get into that Brian Dozier and Kyle Gibson. I mean, these are like the media savvy, like real guys that were always like the spokespeople in the room. When the going gets tough, you lean on a couple guys to give the state of the union on, hey, what's going on with this team? Their quote resonates with the fan base. Kind of protect some of the teammates. You see the current guys like Royce Lewis is going to be a star, both on and off the field. He gets it. A great player, obviously the first overall draft pick back in 2017, but also just truly a good role model. My son looks up to him. He's still very, very young, but he's doing the hospital visits. He's doing the appearances for the corporate department. He's signing autographs for the kids. He's doing the interviews. I mean, really kind of gets it. Carlos Correa might be one of the biggest pros that I've ever been around. He is polished. He's accountable. He's at that locker. He grinds it out, plays every day. I mean, that's the other thing too. You see these guys playing through things.
Yeah.
Because it's not all days when they limp into the clubhouse and they get some treatment and 4 hours later they're facing Garrett Cole throwing 100. I mean, it's not always the easiest assignment, but you can't always sit there and make excuses for the guys either. They don't want you to, share that information. It's just like behind closed doors, there's a lot that goes on to get ready for the game, and humor, hard work. It's, combination of, like I said, you're around each other. How I balance like my life, I spend more time, I think, with Mike Herman, Rod McCormick, and the coaching staff, and then the players, than I see my wife.
Yeah.
In the season.
Yeah.
We travel. That's generally where you bond the most. You're on the planes, you're on the buses, you're at the hotels. It's easier to get a breakfast or a cup of coffee with a guy, talk about, life away from the game. And sometimes in my job, I do have to talk about the game and, kind of strategize about what we're going to say, whether it's, an injury or maybe something that is happening in their life that, in the headlines for some other reason. But it's kind of it's a fun part of the job. It's just, you really are kind of working around the clock, at least in PR, 24/7. You can't control when the news breaks, or, I mean, when Derek Falvey calls and we're going to make a trade, it's like, I can't predict what time that's going to be. And sometimes it's like, I got to put my PR hat on. Like we talked about when a manager gets fired or a player gets traded, like I have no emotions there. I have to, all right, here's what the press release is going to say. Here's when the press conference is. I'm going to call the media. We're going to get the cameras there. We're going to get, you just kind of get in this mode. And then it's my time later when I get home with my family to talk about, like, wow, and I can't believe, Torrey Hunter signed with the Angels.
Yeah.
Oh, man, that hurts. But the older you get, you realize too, it's a fraternity. Like you see so many of the men and women throughout the game by playing each other a lot and traveling to cities, and it's almost more special. Like we're playing the Rays right now, and I spent 5 years of my life training in a young man named Elvis Martinez, who was, attached at the hip. And this winter, he decided to pursue an opportunity with the Tampa Bay Rays, and I was extremely happy for him. Promotion for him. He's doing what he loves, step up. He's back here in Minnesota as we're taping this, he's here for the first time as a member of the Tampa Bay Rays. And that's awesome to see too.
Yeah.
You don't need to see everybody every day. But you want to check in with people throughout the year because we're all kind of going through the same thing. And it's nice to, share those stories, internally, look for advice, bounce ideas off of each other. I mean, there's 30 teams in the game. And by this point in my career, I've got pretty strong friendships at all 29 other clubs. So it's a great game.
You were talking about the money stuff and lives at stake, and also the emotions it takes when you see so many people come in this game. Some people get fired, some people let go, some people retire, some people seek other opportunities, like you were saying about Elvis. And I think that's the part of the game that nobody really talks about is these, people get traded, people get DFA'd, injuries where they're forced to retire.
Yeah. I mean, rosters change year after year, and obviously within the year. I mean, it really is, we've all probably collected baseball cards or something similar, and it's, trading and moving guys around, it's real, right? And you see, on the surface, it looks real easy. It's like, oh, he's traded to the Kansas City Royals. He's in uniform the next day, but their support system, their wives, kids have to pick up and move, and those friendships and those bonds that you have with your former team, it's hard on some of those guys. And, baseball's made a lot of people a lot of money, and you hear about all those stories and all the names, the great guys that have played the game. But for every guy that's made a ton of money, there's that minor league grinder that, maybe was a 17th round pick, didn't make a lot of money in the draft, grinding it out at, low A, high A, hope you get to double A, your body starts hurting, you're grinding it out, you get to triple A, maybe you get that cup of coffee, but you've spent 10 years to get there, and you're a 30-year-old, journeyman that's trying to get some time in the big leagues. And those are really moments that we try to celebrate in a clubhouse. But you also, the realist in me knows me that clock is ticking for that individual. They might get 15, 20 days in the big leagues, and there's so many of those stories, right? That just, you don't remember the names. They come and go, or a guy might have a ton of potential, and it looks like, I don't know. I mean, I think back when I was with the Cubs, Mark Pryor was it Mark Pryor or Joe Mauer? Which way were the Twins going to go? Because the Cubs were sitting there with the second pick, and I worked for the Cubs at the time.
Oh, yeah.
And it was, I think at the time, everybody thought the Twins were being cheap and signing Mauer and let Pryor slip to the Cubs. Well, he was supposed to be the next, Roger Clemens, Greg Maddux, everything in between. But, injuries derailed his career. Now, he's still in the league as a coach and been around for a while, but, nothing's promised.
Yeah, nothing.
And there's so many guys that don't make it. It's tough. It's tough. So many guys are drafted. So many guys are in that world in the minor leagues where, the reality is, every team's got 10 to 20 prospects that they just need everybody else to play. Yeah. So those 10 to 20 prospects can play the game.
Yeah.
Right. And every once in a while, those other 200, somebody, sneaks through and is, hey, that's a great player. That's a Brian Dozier, an 8th round pick. He exceeded all expectations. But really, it's hard to reach even AAA, let alone the big league. So, money is certainly a part of the equation when you hit it and you get it big and you sign that first contract or whatever it might be, and you're so happy for those guys too, because the hard work that went into it. So, injuries, money, competition, you see that too. You see good friends competing for the same position.
Yeah.
And that can get a little dicey. And I mean, I remember Trevor Plouffe, who's pretty famous on social media too.
Shout out Trevor.
Trev, but the Sano train was coming.
Yeah.
And he knew it. And it was tough in my position because Trevor was pretty blunt too. He's like, you just waiting for Sano to come. And it's like, I mean, I love Trevor, but it was like, in a sense, he was real. He knew he was pretty good self-assessing. I mean, he knew that he was holding down a position until, whoever the next guy was. And that's tough.
Yeah.
Sometimes in my position, you don't want to know what the plans are for the GM and what the roster is going to look like in that given off season moving into the next season, because these guys become your friends. And the less you know sometimes is just deniability, right?
Yeah.
Like, I don't know what the plans are. So, but you see friendly competition, guys fighting for rotation spots, the end of spring training. You've seen a Nico, you see a guy get cut.
Yep.
That's been, it's generally that catcher that's been around for a while trying to hold down a spot.
Yeah.
Catches 300 bullpens during a 6-week period down in a hot Florida sun, and then just can't crack the roster. And, oh, by the way, there's no spot for you at AAA either, and you're just out of the game.
Yeah.
And that's how it ends.
Yeah.
And it's
every year.
That's hard. That's the harsh reality of this sports. And you know what you do? You know what you're signing up for, because it's such a, all sports, it's hard to play at the highest level. But, man, when that day comes and somebody tells you it's over, I haven't been in a room for that, but I've been on the outside of the room.
Yeah.
And those are emotional and tough. And, you hope all those players can look back and say they gave it their all and they were in a position to do what so many can't and just compete at, the professional level, which is also saying something. So, you see a lot of things over the course of a career when you're working in sports.
Yeah.
I always say to myself, I'm lucky that when I go down to Florida for spring training, I generally feel confident I'm on that plane ride for opening day.
Yeah. Yes.
But 60, 70 players go to camp and we're flying north with 26.
Yeah.
All 70 of those players think they're going to make the team, give or take.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, they don't.
Yeah.
Now, I mean, some of them have a chance down the road, but stress involved with the game, anxiety, your mental health.
Yes.
That's something that's more acceptable today than it was 10, 15 years ago, probably even 5 years ago.
Yeah.
But talking about those struggles, whether you're an elite closer that just can't get that third strike right now or getting hit, you don't know why, it's eating at you. I mean, a lot of guys won't be too proud to go get some help and talk through those pressures. I mean, you got 30,000 fans screaming at you, expecting you to get that hit, and you strike out, you're walking back to the dugout to end a game.
Yeah.
Again, I'm generally the guy at the top of the step waiting to open that clubhouse to the media and have that player address why he didn't get a hit there. So no excuses. Again, you know what you're signing up for because it's sports.
Yeah.
And some teams are going to win and some teams are going to lose, and individual success and individual failures. But man, it's you got to remember that human element. It's not easy. There's certainly times to joke around and have a good time, and when you're tracking down a division title or something, you're in the driver's seat. Those are fun times.
Yeah.
Generally pretty light, but there's still guys competing for jobs or trying to, impress somebody for next year.
Yeah.
It might be a free agent at the end of a contract. You want to keep playing. So generally always you're playing for something. You want to say you're playing for your team, but sometimes guys do need to play for their futures and, their families and what they want to continue to do and how late they want to play in their career. I used to always say I felt really good, like I could still play or I could still compete with these guys as long as there was one player that was older than me.
Yeah.
And I was like, I felt really good when Jim Thome was on the roster and then Nelson Cruz came, who we should talk about Nelly Cruz because he's an unbelievable human being. But awesome. I was like, we're the same age. Like now it's like, I think this is the first roster that I've been on that I am older than absolutely everybody in that clubhouse, including the manager. It's the first time in my career that Rocco, I mean, he's younger than me. So that's wild. But every once in a while, a player comes along that changes your life too. And that was Nelson Cruz for me.
Really?
He was just a really good person in my life. It was kind of during the COVID time when we really got close. We were in this bubble that you really couldn't leave. And Nelly just taught me to take care of myself.
Yeah.
How to eat better, how to work out. Ever since Nelson Cruz, I've tried to work out at least 5-6 times a week to better myself. And, I always think to myself, what would Nelly do? I mean, he would work out like 2 times a day, and he would take like 1,000 swings, whether it's on the machine or tee work or flips. I mean, the guy was a machine. He's out of baseball right now.
Yeah.
And he'll resurface, whether it's a coach or an executive or an ambassador of the game, and maybe he'll still play next year. I wouldn't doubt him. But he's probably still working out. He's probably still taking cuts in his cage somewhere.
He's always been like, I remember he played with my dad in Texas in 08, 09. That's when he was really young in the game, but he was definitely that guy out there, always in like either getting advice from the trainer on like how to move his body correctly in certain positions. I'm a kid. I'm like, oh, what is this stuff? But then out there twice, like out there during BP, he's asking other coaches stuff. He's really trying to better his game, so that doesn't surprise me at all.
Nelly had a pretty severe wrist injury. We were in the playoff push. I think it was in 19, part of the Bomba squad. I mean, we were hitting homers every which way, and Nelly's wrist gave out. And it was pretty much, it was determined that was probably the end. His wrist, torn ligament or something. Yeah. But it's Nelson Cruz.
Yeah.
So what did Nelson Cruz do? He went home and he took soft toss. The story is, maybe it's getting embellished nowadays, but Adiel, his cousin, was giving him flips, but they were like with oranges. He was hitting, because he didn't have any baseballs in him, so he's hitting oranges in his garage, and his wrist felt good. It's like, there's no way. But he went on the IL for like 10 days and came back and never had a surgery or anything and kept hitting bombs. So freak hit that ligament. I guess you don't need it. I don't know, some weird thing in your wrist where it was like
oranges.
Yeah, man, he proved that he could. I don't know, man. He wanted to keep playing, but Nelly, he's a guy that also told me he was working out with Luis Ariz. A couple quick stories here on hitting, and guys that are just really good at it. But Nelson, we keep in touch quite a bit, and he would send me videos of whatever workout he was doing, but also like his hitting routine. And I liked seeing what he was doing. But he had Luis Ariz working out with him this last offseason, and he was telling me how locked in he was, and look at this, look at that. And he's like, he's going to win a batting title this year, right? Yeah. It's like, I don't doubt him. He won one last year, you know, and we trade him. Nelly was not pleased, but Pablo Lopez is the man. It was a good baseball trade, but it looks as if Ariz is going to go down and win another batting title with Miami, which is really, really crazy. But what's crazier is Rod Carew. Rod Carew, if you don't know who he is, I mean, he is maybe the top 5 to 7 hitters ever to play the game. Great Twins ambassador, Twins Hall of Famer, Cooperstown enshrined, like the baseball god. Literally. So way back when, like one of my first years in 06, Rod Carew says, sitting in the press box with me, and casually says, hey, when Joe Mauer wins a couple batting titles, I'd like to get a picture with me, Tony Oliva, and Joe in our silver bats. I'm like, not just win a batting title, win a few batting titles. I'm like, well, fast forward, Joe ends up winning 3 batting titles, and we get that picture. Oh, you better bet your ass we got that picture. So it's like, man, this guy, Rod Carew then, prior to last year, and he's not like being like funny. He's like, we're in one of the offices in the clubhouse, and this is prior to the season starting. Maybe it was opening day. And he's like, hey, we're going to have to freshen up that picture, the one with me, Tony, and Joe and our bats. When Louis Ariz wins one this year, I want to get a new picture. I'm like, right, Rod. Yeah, no problem.
Yeah.
Who won the batting title last year? Luis Ariz. So I'm like, gosh, Rod Carew, he can, game recognizes game.
Some people they just know. They've been around it for so damn long.
And then, hey, another fun story. Jim Thome, again, one of the greatest guys I've ever worked with. There was one day, he waved me over to his chair in the clubhouse, and he was sitting on, I think it was 572 career home runs. And he's sitting there at his locker, just kind of gripping his bat. And he waves me over, and he's like, bananas. I'm like, bananas? Bananas. They're just like home runs. They come in bunches. I'm like, what's he getting at? He went out and hit 2 home runs that day, passed Harmon Killebrew on the all-time list. And after the game, he's like, I told you, bananas, home runs. They come in bunches just like bananas. I was like, You called your shot today. You knew you were doing that.
And he did it.
And then how about him hitting his 599 and 600 in Detroit?
Crazy.
Those are always like tough balls to get. Fans want them.
Yeah.
I mean, I believe they belong to the player, and the player can do it. Well, he was so kind to hit both in the bullpen, and our guys got them, so we got those balls pretty easy. But Jim was also just an amazing guy to work with, and great storyteller, great ambassador for the game, and just became a good friend. And there's so many stories like that these guys just it's really, really fun to work with. All ages, too. I think back to, like, the beginning of some of these relationships and these young guys that, I don't know, you don't know if they're going to be, what they're going to be, right? I mean, Francisco Liriano, he was a kid that was kind of following the direction of Carlos Silva and Johan Santana. Yeah. He became like an electric starter for us that was, one of Terry Ryan's greatest trades with the Giants, where he got Joe Nathan and Liriano. And so you're along for the ride, man. You see how these guys just do great things on the field, and it's so fun to be a part of. And like I said, it's really ultimately my job to now tell the story of those players, whether it's through traditional PR, but now I also oversee the content department, and it's like this stuff, creating and telling stories, videos, hype videos. Social media has changed the game, right? I mean, it's really like you can post stuff on all these different platforms that are just fun things to produce, right?
Yeah.
And if you got player participation, and some guys have a better knack for it than others, or an appetite to do certain things, and whether it's humor, pranks, or just wearing a microphone and showing us what a day is like in the big leagues, it's fun to kind of go through all this. Like, in the 20 plus years that I've been here, you've seen a change in how this sport has been introduced to the fans. And I think right now we're trying to connect with kids, and how they consume their content. YouTube's huge, Instagram and TikTok and Snapchat, and how they find certain things. I'm learning a lot through my kids, my 11-year-old, my 15-year-old, on how and where they get their information, man. And it's, they see you, man. My kids think you're awesome, and you're Mr. Hollywood. So
trying.
you've had to reinvent yourself a number of times, like all of us, and it's baseball. It's again, going back to connecting generations, man. We're trying to find a way to make sure our oldest fans are getting what they want, and how we introduce the game to our very our youngest fans, 3-4-year-olds that are coming to the ballpark.
That'll eventually be 90.
Yeah, that's kind of our I don't know, man. That's our ability to make a magic moment. I mean, if you're walking through the ballpark and you see you can do something, I mean, I always like to keep, at the beginning of the year, I'll ask some of our star players for some sign balls.
Yeah.
And I always tell them, like, hey, when the moment's right, I'm going to give this to one of your fans. And it's with good intentions that these guys, like Max Kepler. Everybody loves Max Kepler. Yep. It's like, it's nice to be able to hear a story about Max and then go surprise that fan with an autograph, and then maybe I'll later get Max to do a little video and text that video. I mean, you can get really creative on how to connect with fans these days, and it's kind of my job to identify where and when we can do that, and not bother the guys too much with that pressure I was telling you about, that preparation, that hard work, the time in the gym, the time in the video room, the time in the advanced meetings, the time with their teammates talking about things. I mean, guys show up 7-8 hours before first pitch, and it's generally getting their bodies and their minds right to face whoever they're facing that night when the lights go on. So it's not all glamorous, man. You see guys wincing and crying, and Kyle Farmer took one in the teeth, and his teeth were in the back of his throat, and his tongue was stuck under his gum line, and you're trying to, like, figure out what you can do to help him. You let him take, the trainers and all that take care of him. But I had a little league team that I was coaching that was so worried about Kyle Farmer that, I had told them that he was doing okay, and these kids were just like beside themselves and a little scared to get hit. So what did I do? I was able to have that relationship with Farmer. We FaceTimed him. And this little league team saw Kyle on that FaceTime, and he told those boys he's all right. he's gonna, he'll be back on that field. And he said exactly what these little guys needed to hear. And, there he was 3-4 weeks later back on the field doing all right. So that's today's player, man. They're not afraid to pick up and FaceTime or send a note to a player, or these ways that they can connect personally on their social platforms. But baseball is also hard. You got a lot of critics out there that aren't afraid to chirp, and that's tough,
mind.
Man. That's tough for these guys to see, because they're trying their best.
Yeah,
they're putting max effort out there to put on a show, and it doesn't always go our way. And there's some outspoken fans that aren't afraid to share their thoughts.
Oh yes. Well, Dustin, you're a plethora of baseball knowledge, and like really for real, thank you for doing this. And I appreciate you helping us. Dustin's the one that's helped us get all these podcast interviews, but also just being a really good friend. I mean that. You're always awesome. You're the one I look forward to seeing. You, Hot Rod, all the guys, and Mike. So thank you for everything.
You show me something, and you get a couple of those guys. If you can get Hot Rod in this,
dude, that's what I want.
You got to get him. I'm going to go down there, and Hot Rod is our clubhouse manager, equipment manager, and he's got the stories that you want to hear. I mean,
all the good ones.
He's got the good ones and the ones I can't remember, and I've been a part of a few of them. But he doesn't go on camera too often.
I know he doesn't.
But he, I know, is thinking about this. So,
it'd be great.
One of the classic characters in the game. You see a lot of them. But your dad's one of them as well. Yeah. And tell him, hey, Eddie, get off him, man. We're going to make this thing's going to be a success. Kangaroo Court, all right?
Yeah, I appreciate that.
Good luck to you guys, too.
Hey, thank you.
I'm honored to be a part of a podcast, and, hopefully get some really good baseball stories and some new fans to the game for this.
Yes, sir. Thank you.